Peter, Janette, and Ed.
Okay. Most of you are familiar. My name is Peter Moon. I'm an author and publisher from America. I live in New York. I hope that someday some of you can come to visit me in New York. This Atlantykron is all about a personal journey, and my personal journey has led me to you in Atlantykron, and it's a very incredible journey because it is about the frontier of time, the final frontier of time. And of course, I've written a book called The Montauk Project: Experiments in Time, which was a book that changed the way the world looked at time. Scientists were forced to come up to speed because Preston Nichols was a scientist who worked on time projects. And that book was brought to the attention of Dr. David Anderson, who liked it because he realized that my mind was very open about time in a way that most of his colleagues were not. So he ended up bringing me here 5 years ago, and I believe, as I said yesterday, that it was a marker in time. He wanted me to come to Romania for some reason that remains mysterious, unknown. Some part of him wanted me to be here. And I think we will see him here again in the future at some time. But when I arrived here, I was told by Florine and Mihaila and others to go to Sarmizegetusa. So this has become a great personal quest, and we will be going there. Now, Janette, and I will talk more about my journey in a moment, but I'm going to give context to Janette had contacted me. She was in Romania. Maybe she can say a few words about that. Just before I continue, say, how did you and why did you contact me?
So, this is my 6th time to Romania, and the 3rd time, a 16-year-old boy had just read Radu Sinamar's books, and he was telling me all these stories of secret caverns and tunnels under the Bucegi Mountains. And he said, you have to go there. And I said, why would I want to go to a top secret place? I don't know what that is. And it snowed, so we didn't have to go to the mountain. But he said, because of your special gifts, you can just go on a journey, a shamanic journey. So I sat in an apartment in Bucharest, and I journeyed into the mountain, into the cavern at Bucegi. And I saw some things that later, when I read Peter's translation of Radu's books, I had to call Peter and say, Peter, I know this place. I've been there in an inner journey. And so out of my mouth comes, we have to do a trip together. And so I'm bringing people from all over the world, as far away as Australia, to come. And we're spending 10 days traveling around to the sacred places, feeling the energy, opening portals, having an adventure. So that's how we came with you.
Thank you. Now, when...
Peter, excuse me, just we have 2 microphones over there. 3 actually with Ed's head.
All right.
Thanks.
When... this was about 3 years ago she said this. So she says, do you want to do a trip together? And I said, sure. And of course, she says, I plan things far in advance. So it took some 2.5 or 3 years for it to happen. And there was a question of whether her husband Ed here would be able to make it. And when she said he could, I lobbied hard for him to not just come along with us, which he would have done. And I wanted her to come to Atlantykron. That was not a requisite, but I said this is a wonderful opportunity for her to get a bigger dose of not only Romania, but esoteric Romania and the wonderful things that are done here and the special spot here. So, I mean, I could have easily just come here and met up with her later, but no, I wanted her to be a part of the family that's here. And when Ed was coming, I knew that he had incredible talents to offer you in the area of leadership. So, you know, I'm more than happy to share the time that would be allotted to me or us with him, because his skills are very important. Leadership is a very important part of what goes on here and what needs to go on here. And of course, the roles that Janette and I are doing are leadership in the esoterica of life, which is very important. And so I want you to say a few words about what you're going to do later after Janette and I speak.
Okay, great. Delighted to be here. And if you heard me introduce myself the other night, you heard me say that I've had the privilege of working with people from 67 countries. And when we've worked with people for at least 2 days, we have always taken them through a process that invited them to see themselves differently than they ever have before, in a most empowering way. So I'm going to invite you to go on a journey with me, a little experiential opportunity with me, and at the end of that, I suspect that 95% of you will see yourself differently in a very empowered way at the end of that. That's what I'm going to take you through. Then after that, if you want to get together and talk about leadership specifically and ideas and tools and what you could do more effectively, I would love to do that after lunch, those kinds of things.
Thank you, Ed. Now I'm going to begin speaking by a little bit more about how I got in this adventure that we're on and where we're going, what we're doing, and how it can or will impact Romania, which I consider Romania my adopted country, my second country. There are people and indications that I should move here. Well, I can only move here if I learn the language, number one, and if the vibration of what I'm doing now, which is at a very high level of vibration with Qigong, can graduate to a higher level. There's indications that might happen, but it's a potential, not a certainty. Now, and I got to share one thing. When I last saw David Anderson, I said, "What can you tell us about the future?" And he gave me a very honest, a very good answer. He says, "It is uncertain." I loved his answer. Because if you're working with somebody like him who ostensibly has insight into time and into what might be happening, and he says that, well, it reiterates free will, free choice. Now, the adventures I've had with the Montauk Project led to experiences in synchronicity, quantum synchronicity, and we're not going to go and elaborate on those because they're quite extensive and they're in all of my books and they're utterly fascinating, but we have to be very condensed here in a short amount of time. So what I learned about synchronicity, it's a word coined by Carl Jung, the psychologist who was the colleague and contemporary and eventually breakaway from Sigmund Freud. But Carl Jung said, he coined the word synchronicity in the Western language, and he said that it is a precursor to the Tao. The Tao, or T-A-O in English, which pronounced Tao, is the principle underlying all other principles, the mystery underlying all mysteries. When you can define the Tao, it is not the true definition. So, but synchronicity means you're approaching that underlying mystery, that fundamental. I tried to study Taoism when I was a teenager, in the beginning of my esoteric adventures, similar in age to you. And there was only the book, the Tao Te Ching. The practitioners were silent, they were secret. They were near me in San Francisco, in Chinatown, but they were not going to open their doors to a Westerner. The story of Bruce Lee is notorious about them closing the doors to the Westerner, closing him teaching Westerners, and eventually he goes down the tubes. But all of my adventures in synchronicity and time led me to the medicine man of the Montauk Indians, Artie Crippen, who was half Chinese and half Montauk Indian. And of course, the native indigenous people are embracive of all peoples. There's not this sequestered, no, you don't belong. So he introduced me to my Qigong teacher, Roosevelt Gainey, and who was, as one of my healing friends who met him said, he knows how to be in a body better than anybody I've ever met, because he can do wonderful things. And I'm not going to make this a lecture on Qigong, but it's too important not to mention. Qigong has been an integral part of my development because it has taught me life extension, athletic extension. I would be washed up as an athlete, which I enjoy doing still. I wouldn't be able to play if not for the Qigong, because it extends my ability to play at a decent or high level. I could play at an even higher level if I spent more time practicing, but there are other priorities. And the Qigong is energy, it is breath work, it is spirit work, it is life work. And of course, when you do it, magical things begin to happen. Now, all of this work that I was doing, and with David Anderson contacting me and leading me, bringing me here to Atlantykron and Romania, simultaneous to this, I was making negotiations or relations with Sorin Hormuz, who we want to get here someday. He couldn't make it this year. He's the editor or the publisher, the owner of Daksha Publishing, who has published Radu Shinamar's books in Romanian. And I will be meeting with him at some point on this journey. But these books are about this wonderful, incredible chamber called the greatest artifact in Romania, that's beneath the Sphinx in Bucegi. And it has holographic technology, according to the story, that reads out your DNA, much like we were seeing on the Apple iPad yesterday with molecules and whatnot, only this is a little more graphically intense. And it's a wonderful adventure story, but he insists it's true. The second book in the series, which would be translated directly from Romanian as 12 Days, A Secret Initiation in the Mysterious Land of the Gods, I published it in English as Transylvanian Moonrise. And it's an incredible story. In fact, it's the best book I've ever read as a science fiction fan, or as a science fan, or as an esoteric fan. It is literally the best book. It's like Roberto was talking about, his favorite author, Robert Sheckley. Well, this book is my favorite book. And the intelligence community, the military community, and saying, this is real because this happened, or I know this, I know this. The press was surprisingly corroborative of this. Now, not corroborative of the exact details, because nobody knows what happened there or is happening there except a very privileged few. There was a man I met last year who was not connected to Atlantykron, and he told me that if you go into Bucegi and you talk to the people, there were Americans all over Bucegi during that time period, because the Americans the Romanians needed the American technology to dig up this chamber, which was not easy to do technologically. So whatever we know, there were a lot of American hanging out in that tiny little town, and they were not tourists. So there are stories like this that corroborate. There's also Romania becoming a part of NATO and becoming allies with the United States in a way that it never was before. So there are several corroborative elements. When we come back, so that's how the second book begins. And then it begins with the author, Radu, who was allowed to see the chamber. He's basically sort of an outside journalist. He's brought into this to report the story. The people that are creating this story are not him. They are pushing it down the line to him, and he is to write about it. And the authorities are very happy because it's dismissed as science fiction. This is the whole plausible denial. Well, it's an incredible story. It's science fiction. And most people are not at the level of being able to even think about accepting this as true. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but you have to get your dismissive factor. Okay, I'm not going to dismiss it. Now, it happens to be my profession, which is a very interesting profession, to take it as seriously as possible. It does not mean that I openly, gullibly accept everything. I accept that there's an incredible story there, and there is circumstantial evidence to indicate something of a very mysterious nature occurred. Now, the second book begins with Radu becoming contacted, or his publisher becoming contacted by a mysterious man who's called Eleanor, not his real name. And he says, there's a man who wants to meet you. This man is a Tibetan Lama. Or not meet you, but meet Radu, whose communication is very much censored and filtered. So it gets through, and a meeting is arranged in Bucharest at Eleanor's house in Bucharest, which is a brand new house, and it's got an alchemical laboratory in the basement, and he's an alchemist, and he's a very special man. Now, in this book, he's just going to this house to meet the Lama, who's going to appear there at 10 o'clock at night or something. And the Lama is late. He gets a phone call saying, the Lama is saying, I'm late. So this discussion ensues about alchemy. And this is the most interesting part of the book to me, the beginning, although the rest of it's very interesting too. And the book is about Eleanor, or this part of it is about, he looks like he's 27, but he's 60 years old. He shows him his driver's license. And this is a fascinating, well, how can you be look 27 and be 60? And he goes into a long description, which I will spare you because of the time constraints, but how one of his ancient ancestors was initiated in this tradition in India, having been kidnapped, and after his family was wiped out in a war, taken to, I think it was Baghdad, where he ended up in India and was initiated in a tradition of magic and alchemy, whereby his life was elongated, and he was to look for an ancestor who was worthy of this, because he would watch his ancestor. He was living for a long time, and there were different devices to extend your life, which would be elixirs, or also through creating a sacred geometrical instrument. And the instrument is like a rhomboid, and within the rhomboid is a sphere, within that is a tetrahedron, within that is a crystal, which is made to turn violet. It's a secret procedure which emits a vibration which elongates your life, keeps you at a steady frequency. And as I tell you, in my personal experience, I was being initiated or programmed, so to speak, with Qigong to extend my normal lifespan of 70 or 80 years into hundreds of years. And having reversed so much of what we call premature old age, I am totally confident of that, barring no unfortunate circumstances, that now I'm being exposed to a tradition which is saying, no, not just 150, up into 300, and even more if necessary, but the purpose of this tradition is not to see how long you can live. And it certainly gives new insights into the ideas of Methuselah and the people in the Bible who are said to have lived 900 years or thereabouts. Maybe they really were real years. And the purpose of this long life is not to see how long you can live and put marks on a chalkboard, but to transcend the human condition. And we find this very interesting with the legend of Zalmoxis, who is a man who becomes a god. He transcends from one to the other. And what I had learned in Romania last year, that Zalmoxis is not so much one person, but an archetype who has embodied many, many characters. So, and it runs deep, because I met a man from an esoteric group in Romania who'd explain these things to me. So, if Mount Qigong or Sarmizegetusa or these regions under the earth where Zalmoxis supposedly went to have his transformation and emerge as a god, it's a very inspirational legend. And what I like about this legend is it has particular teeth and fiber to it in my own quest, because this story is about this Eleanor character. In my correspondence with Radu, he said, I'm supposed to meet this man before the end of November, and he's going to meet me in New York, not here. It's a sensitive issue in Romania. He's had to leave Romania at various times, because if you're living in a house and you're not growing older in the same community, people begin to ask questions, it becomes a problem. It's a professional hazard. So I'm supposed to meet this incredible character, and if I do meet this incredible, maybe it won't happen, maybe it will. But if I do meet this incredible character, my horizons have been set. I'm going to want to learn about his tradition. And there is a feeling in my heart that it will draw me back to Romania in more than just my capacity of coming to Atlantykron. So the mystery deepens. Now the mystery, so there are many lines of energy and confluence that are bringing me to Romania. And Janette's adventure with me is a, wow, it's like it's boosting the whole paradigm. Because when I came here the first time, I was told to go to Sarmizegetusa. The second year, I was prepared to go, and it was very challenging to go as somebody who does not speak the language and trying to make forays. And I had met this wonderful friend, Nicole Vasilkovsky, my first year, who seemed to recognize me on a very deep spiritual level, and she volunteered to take me. So we had this incredible adventure to Sarmizegetusa. I met a woman there who is going to build a house there. And I just wrote to her the other night and I said, I want to come stay in your house. And she says, I want you more than you want to be there. So it's a wonderful welcoming, because she's going to live there at some point or nearby. So I'm told you're supposed to spend 3 days there, preferably around April 27th, when the energy is the strongest. So nearby, and I think you pronounce it Mount Ciano, is that how you say it? Is that right, Mount Ciano?
No.
No?
Shurano.
Ciano.
Shurano.
Okay. All right. That means you're listening. That's good. So anyway, in Radu's fourth book, which is called in English The Secret Parchment, 5 Tibetan Initiation Techniques, it goes into the history of Romania and how the Transylvania basin did not have glaciation in it during the Ice Age. But these are not assertions by this book. They are substantiated elsewhere. So that mankind, whatever mankind was outside of Transylvania, if they were going to survive, except for maybe some few exceptions, had to recede into Transylvania, and then after 10,000 years ago in the Ice Age, they would re-emerge. So this is this is the heart, the center. And as Florine says, the corpus callosum, it's where east meets west. But it's even deeper than that. It's the antecedents of civilization. And with that, there is an extraterrestrial component, which is a whole different subject that I won't go into at this time. And it does, ironically, relate to the planet Mars, Rh negative, because in the book Transylvania Moonrise, he's taken through a space-time translation, which is described very well in terms of science fiction, from Transylvania to Tibet, where he goes into a cave and meets a blue goddess, Mashande. And the blue goddess is very important to my work because I've written about the blue race. I'm not going to digress onto that, being Rh negative and being the forerunners of civilization, having come from Mars, which had a civilization. And if the Mars rover finds, I don't know what they're going to find on the outside, I don't know what's going to be censored, but what's inside of Mars might be more interesting than what's outside of Mars, just as what's inside of the Earth here. So there is, underneath this mountain near Sarmizegetusa, is huge finds of gold, kilometers and kilometers of straight, pure gold veins, which does not occur in normal geology. In most normal geology, you'll have, if you had a nugget this big, it would be huge. It might be this big, but this is pure gold. And there is a spiritual continuity to this. It facilitates consciousness on a very high level, and they explain that this is why there's so many wonderful, mysterious, spiritual aspects to not just Transylvania, but Romania. And outside of Romania is largely a mystery to the outside world. Mostly of what people respond to it is what they see on TV, which is the vampire, which is a complete misdirection. And perhaps it's a good invisibility cloak, because people don't know what's going on. And people resonate with the lower aspects too many times. So so this is an utterly fascinating country, but not for what most people outside of it would think. And I've had the privilege to come here. Now, in this fourth book that he has written, it talks about a cave that was accidentally discovered in 1990 when they were doing archaeological digs. And this cave led down a pathway that got bigger and bigger, and it was a huge underground walkway that was eventually, well, it was obviously built by an ancient civilization that was before the dogs. Say that again?
It's in connection to all the Europe. I've been in Turkey also.
Yes, yes. Well, this is what in Bulgaria they call the Proto-Thracians, the people that were before the Thracians, that the Thracians derived from. Now, this underground cavern goes deeper and deeper to where they see the huge gold veins. And they take some pictures of them. They go deeper and deeper, and they find a bed that is like a rectangle with hieroglyphics on it. And the hieroglyphics, they don't understand them, but they study them. The pictures came out. And this became, according to the book, the highest state secret of Romania, even higher than the complex in Bucegi, because all this gold would have created great political problems. And right now, the Canadian mining company is trying to take this gold from the Romanians. They give them 20%. And there was a Supreme Court edict that was issued against it. You may have seen a commercial with the lady who played Mary Magdalene in The Passion. She's ripping off her gold earrings and bleeding her ears, and this caused the peasants to revolt against this and get the Supreme Court to stop the Canadian mining company. And the Canadian mining company still wants to go after this gold and give a crummy 20% to the Romanians. I believe it ends up going to the Queen of England one way or another, in my opinion. But anyway, when we go to, in this story, they send this to scientists, and they say there's an indentation on this bed. They believe there's somebody was sleeping on this bed of gold because it makes it indents, and gold is malleable. My interpretation, which was not given in the book, is that this was being used for out-of-body travel of some sort, because the gold acts as a super conductor. There's a deeper story to why gold acts as a superconductor with the human physiology, and not everybody will agree with it, but it's a different story we will not pass on. My impression is that the main character in this book, who is Cesar Brad, or identified as Cesar Brad, who has extra sensory capabilities that were taught to him by the Lama, cultivated because he already had them when he was born, that he's in recent times has gotten access to this chamber and used this, and he was contacted by other beings because in Radhu's personal letters to me, it does not appear in the book, although I put it in the book in the English versions. He told me that Cesar had left to become an ambassador to the inner earth. This is a very far out story. It is hard to accept at face value. It is a story. However, when I get to the fourth book and I see that, and I'm concluding on my own that he's using this bed for out-of-body travel, it then becomes more evident to me that maybe this story is true. Maybe he was contacted and he has been out of touch for the most part with Department Zero, who he headed up actually, the most secretive apparatus of Romanian intelligence. So he has pledged and written that he will come back at some time in the future. It's probably not the far future. These books go into some of the politics, the kernel of politics in Romania, which you can see some evidence of the outer politics mimicking them, including this recent prime minister activity who is in bed with Wesley Clark, who used to be the commander of NATO. Wesley Clark has a very interesting pedigree. Now, when he was running for president in the United States, he said that time travel was possible, which led me to the conclusion that he might know David Anderson or of his work. I haven't had a chance to ask David if he knows Wesley Clark. I would be very surprised if the two haven't met. To what degree they are allied, I couldn't say. But Wesley Clark revealed when he was running for president, well, first of all, he's a Roman Catholic. But he comes from a long line of Kohen priests, which are Jewish, meaning the Kohen priests are the priests in the Jewish tradition that are the priests to the Ark of the Covenant. So here he is, and he's very proud of this heritage, yet he's a Catholic. Now, I know there's a lot of prejudice in Romanian Orthodoxy against Jews. I was initiated into this by this bishop in the Old Orthodox Church, very concerned about the Jewish element. And of course, I live in New York, so I don't have, and if I did, I can't have any prejudice against Jews because they're all over. You work with them, you have fun with them, they're just people. We're all just people. But anyway, for him to be a Catholic and a Jew strikes me not only as contradictory, but it's a complete political ploy. So he sees beyond that, and he's aligned himself with the prime minister and who's trying to oust the president. To me, this does not make me view him favorably. But then again, I have too little information on everything to know what's really going on there. But it's interesting to watch the drama unfold. Now, to get us back to the issue of what we're doing and where we're going, I should also mention, before I do that when you go beyond this pathway, when they go in this book 4, is they go deeper into these caverns, and it leads them to golden chairs, these big golden chairs that people could sit in with an instrument, oval shaped, that is a gateway to another universe, where they see a planet that looks like Earth, but it's not the Earth because it's different colors. There's stars out there, and the young man who's with him gets swallowed up into it. And as I told somebody, if as a creative person, as a writer, this kid who's swallowed up by a vortex into this planet, and the professor runs away, and the whole thing's shut down because everybody gets scared. But if I was as a writer, I would expect this character who gets swallowed up to reappear in a future book, if there are future books. because it's a great story element. And I mean, this is a conduit to the center of the earth. And I've been told that the deepest mysteries of Romania go deep into the ancient history, into the inner earth, the combination of good and evil. I could even, we don't have time, I could go into more archetypal identifications and extrapolate on this and tell you more details about it. Because friends of mine have seen UFOs in Romania going in and out of these areas. Very sensitive issues, and one of my friends here has had all her pictures or her laptop stolen when other more important things were not stolen. They could have been stolen, like they were sending a message. So basically, I'm very much excited. This has been a wonderful time spent here in Romania thus far, but our journey's not even halfway through. This will be my longest journey to Romania, which is just under 3 weeks. And we're just beginning. Atlantykron is the warm-up act. So I'm going to turn you over to Janette in a minute here, but we're going to be going to this area. We're going to be going to the different sacred sites, and because of the work she does, it will complement my journey. We're co-journeying, and it is courtesy of her and her enterprise that I am being brought back to Atlantykron and back to Romania for the 5th year in a row, which makes me very happy. Last year, Marta Thomas brought me back, and I hope that I come back next year. It's a whole new landscape next year. So, and at some point, David will follow. David Anderson will reappear. I have such a fascinating cast of characters. And some of the people here have become part of the cast. It's very fascinating. So we're going to be working the spiritual energies around these areas and communicating with the elementals and increasing the wonder, the magic. So this is the context in which we're going to hear this